Welcome back to What Am I Reading on the Markout Movie Podcast. This is your host, Brandon Spivey. And today I am going to be giving them a review of Fever, the sequel to Wayne Simmons' Flu. Get right into the synopsis real quick, and I'll give their scores, and I will tell you what I thought about it, and we'll go from there. A deadly strain of flu has mysteriously mutated, causing the deaths of millions throughout Ireland and beyond. But the infected don't stay dead for long, rising up to become flesh-eating monsters. In a quarantine lab just outside Belfast, lab worker Ellie and security guard Abe fight their way through corridors of the living dead, determined to expose a gruesome truth. Aging conspiracy theorist Tom racks his brain to figure out what went wrong. Meanwhile, a young child and her two unlikely wards find themselves in the middle of a cat-and-mouse game involving the remains of the military, a covert government department, and the ever-increasing throng of the dead. The fate of humanity lies in their hands. On Goodreads, this got a 3.8 out of 5. Now I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. Here's what I thought about it. I like Flu. I thought it was an entertaining story, fast-paced. Our reviews up there in the Markout Movie Podcast if you want to check that out on YouTube. Also available at Anchor. Just go to anchor.com, type in the Markout Movie Podcast. It'll give you everything you need to know about what we have done over this past year. It's been an excellent time. But today I'm talking Flu. Not Flu, talking Fever, the sequel to Flu. But is it really a sequel? No, it's not. It's not really a sequel to Flu. The characters in Flu that survived show up around 70 pages left in the book, if that tells you what you get. And this is more of a pre-sequel, more so prequel, I would say. It starts you out in the lab, which I liked. And but before I get into that, I have to say this. When I started reading the book, it said for George A. Romero. I just wanted to get that out of the way. It was dedicated to him. So, Wayne Simmons is a massive fan of George Romero. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, I would say Land of the Dead, and the other countless zombie movies he made. So this is a tribute to George A. Romero, I do believe. Now I'm going to get into the story. It starts in Belfast. You're in this lab. And this is what kind of confused me in the beginning reading this. I do think this is the best part in the book. The first part. It's 5 parts. I think the first one is the best. We're in the lab. It reminded me so much of Resident Evil, the movie. Taking place in that lab, and the zombie, the T virus, kills and reanimates these people into zombies in that lab. So it kind of reminded me of that, because that's what's kind of happening here. They're doing experiments on people. They did experiments on animals. Now they're doing it on people, and it's turning people into zombies, pretty much. And the government's trying to shut it down. Their goal here is to kill everybody in this lab and, contain the virus, so to speak. Obviously, if you read Flu, it doesn't happen. So you kind of know the outcome here, which left question marks for me why you would start your book here, your sequel, but hey, he did. I liked it. Also, another thing confused me about this book, he kept calling Ellie Ellis. Then some people would say Ellie. It just kind of confused. Why is he saying her name's Ellis and people are calling it Ellie? I'm going with Ellie, but it just, maybe it was a typo throughout the book. But hey, I enjoyed her character. I enjoyed Abe. They're fighting through these zombies in this laboratory, and I enjoyed that aspect to this book. After you get finished with that aspect, it jumps to part 2 with these other characters. I'm not going to mention their names, but long term, they didn't pan out to matter in the story. So, I feel like a lot of people would probably compare this book to Walking Dead in some aspects, that they fill in sometimes. That it's filler. It's filler. just filler time. You add these characters who really don't matter to the main story. They're subplots. They don't really matter. That's kind of how I felt with these characters, except for the Sean, Lies, weird name, and their son Jamie. I like those characters, but ultimately, it crashed and burned for me. it There's something that happens towards the end of this book that you don't really get an explanation of what happened. You just see it's happened. Um, but I found those characters more compelling than the other group that you go on this journey with. Uh, like one part of the book, these two characters, they're a divorced couple. You don't know that until midway through the book. You just think they're friends, but no. So I mean, I have. It was a fast paced book. It's really fast paced. I read it in like 6 days, which is fast for me because I'm typically a slow reader, so I take my time with it. But I read it in about 6 days, which is probably slow for a lot of people, but for me, that's quick. Uh, but I didn't hate the book. I just didn't understand the direction you went in, because when you get to this last 70 pages, that's when the survivors from Flu come in. And honestly, you could read this book and skip Flu if you wanted to. And if you did, you'd probably enjoy it more. I really believe that. I think you would enjoy this story more if you skipped Flu. So if you're interested in Flu and this series, because it sets up another one, but this book came out in 2012 and we haven't got another book, so I'm assuming it didn't do well. So I'm assuming you're not gonna get that trilogy. They set something up with this Gallagher character like they did in the end of the first book with him. He's a scientist, doctor, trying to clear everything up, trying to contain everything, and also covering his own butt. But you still, in this book, he's not like a main character or nothing. He's like the villain, but there's no climax with him and these other people. He's still in the same position he was in the first book. He's never left his office or his lab. He's never left it. He has stayed in the same position he was in the first book. So nothing really. There was no climax there. There's no ending to this story. You're not going to get one apparently, but that's the way it went. Anticlimactic. And also another thing, the little girl that I don't want to go into too much detail because I really don't want to spoil it, but they turned her into like almost like Carrie. Almost, she's immune to this virus, but she has special powers as well. That took me out of it because, again, they did it again. It doesn't follow the rest of the book. The tone, it doesn't follow that, and it just happens. And I'm like, really, you did that? It's like that's so disappointing. But overall, if you like zombie books, if you like zombie films, if you love George Romero stuff, you're probably going to actually have a pretty good time with this. Despite the direction the story went into, you're probably going to have a good time. But for me, I'm big on story, and if you're bringing back characters that lived, you kind of want to see where it goes from that point, and you don't really get to that point to like 70 pages to go in the book. So it's more of a prequel leading up to this, and so I've heard people say it's like a parallel novel. You really don't have to read Flu to know what's going on. It's like, I'm not saying it, and yeah, certain people from Flu that was in the first book that connects to this book with these certain characters, like they met on a coincidence. It was unnecessary. I don't know if he didn't think people would remember Flu. I just don't know. But I enjoyed it for the most part. I mean, I'm not going to give it the greatest score, but it's a fast-paced book. It's easy to read. It's fun to read at times, but at times it's not fun. It's a mixed bag, honestly. But here we go. I'm gonna give my final score. I'm giving it a 2.5 out of 5. on a markout meter. There's fun to be had, but more zombie violence this time, which is a plus, but randomness too. I mean, it's just with these characters, there's just randomness, and they ultimately don't matter. What happens to these people just don't matter in the end. It's supposed to connect, and it does in a way with one of the characters, but it just doesn't. It's so many unanswered questions, and we're not getting a third book apparently. So I think it's an unnecessary sequel. I think the direction it went in was unnecessary, and that's why I give it a 2.5. Not that I didn't like it, not that it's not fun to read, not that you're going to get bored. It's just the direction just took me off. It took me out of it. I feel bad for saying that because I think Wayne Simmons is a pretty decent writer, and but he could have wrote the sequel. It could have been a prequel at the lab. He could have wrote a whole novel about that stuff, and I would have been in it because I was very much enjoying that story. Then it cuts to something else. Then it cuts to something else, and it almost felt like, to a certain point, short stories or novelists combined as a novel. But that's just my take on it. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. Again, I am Brandon Spotty from the Markout Movie Podcast. And I will be back doing another episode of What Am I Reading next week. I am reading Ape Shit. Ape Shit. True story. True book. I don't know how to review that, honestly. It's the most disturbing book I've ever read in my life. Short, but disturbing. But anyway, thank you for listening to this review on Fever, the sequel, kinda, of Flu. Stay tuned for this. Stay tuned for Friday's episode of Stephen King's Children of the Corn movie review by Aaron and I. And I think he's doing something in Shudder. No, he did that yesterday. Check out Daniel Isn't Real on the Markout Movie Podcast page. He did that horror and Shudder yesterday, so that was actually a pretty good review. I commend him on that. He did a very good job. So thank you for listening, and until next time. Peace out.